We should be live, and ideally we also have audio. Unless I screwed that up.
By the way, Stephen, nice article about the span of t. I liked it.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for your feedback.
Alright, so let's do the following. I have the EF guys over from 11:30 to 12, so let's keep this one at the end. So what about NPDR and UNPDR? Are we ready to look at this, or do we still want to wait?
Show me which one.
No, I think we're still waiting on the language. Right?
No.
Okay.
It's mark blocked, so ignore
Let's
it.
actually remove this one. This is good.
Let me do it.
I can do it from here as well.
Well,
Since I have it
we
open.
should explain that.
Feel free to do that. I just care about my theory.
Oh, that's...
You know, you can just look at recently changed, right? That's the top item.
No, I've got it. Don't worry about it.
All right. Let's do all of those then. So I think those are all related to memory. So what is this thing here?
I don't know. Is it related?
No, that's what I'm saying. The other three are.
Oh, okay.
The one that's not. So we still
High
have that?
fidelity interpreters.
Didn't we give up on that a long time ago?
So are you streaming?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. And what are high fidelity interpreters?
Expression interpreter here that uses it already.
That's basically just saying that systems that want to replicate the runtime functionality, which would include wrapping some exceptions with a runtime wrapped exception, they're not able to today because the constructor isn't public for doing so. In system link expression, we do so using basically direct access to corelib, and Jan is suggesting that we expose it such that you don't need such access to do this.
I see. So if you want to write your own interpreter that doesn't have access to corelib internals. And do we have like a concrete scenario that we want to enable?
This is the one.
Yes. So my understanding is that the runtime originally did not specify that all exceptions are derived from exception, right? You could just throw arbitrary objects, right? And then I think there was some setting where we said, you know, in order to make life easier, we will wrap them for you in runtime wrapped exception. But given that user code never has to do that, we never expose the public constructor, right? And apparently what they did in Link is Link originally was, I guess, in MS code, so they could probably just construct the type, and then when we moved it out, we used private reflection to access that constructor. And so they just wants to make the constructor public, so we don't have to do this craziness there. Which seems generally like yeah.
I see. So it's about the scenario is Link. It's just we don't want internals visible to, and them using the Link using internal APIs. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's nothing. It's just going to be fun to use all across all R.
It'll just be slow to come around. It's okay.
Yeah.
But now the name is bad.
The class is already public.
Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying that now it became bad because it's not necessarily wrapped by the runtime.
Oh,
Now it's wrapped by anybody.
The C runtime is runtime. Like so.
But now it can be wrapped by user code.
Sure.
If only that were the worst name we have in the framework.
Yeah.
Positive
So what is? Let's vote. What is the worst name in the framework?
System.diagnostics.process. Who the fuck offered that title?
But why is it a bad name?
Because the namespace.
You may argue that it's a bad design, but
Well, the namespace is completely bad. Diagnostics.
not
is
namespace. Come on, namespace is a difference.
Well, the namespace is part of the type name.
Let's ask Marek. He will have opinions. What's the worst thing we ever named?
And I think the process is really not top one, then maybe top three.
Oh, but he authored it. That's why I said it.
Name?
No, the place, because...
Oh, place. We're talking now about names of the types. Don't change the
But it's
subject.
name.
We are not nitpicking at all.
It's name, because if you are learning .NET, start with the full name. Because you need to find it.
What about iPrism?
But there is this nice, I think there is one, second one is the one in the system web, which is like 50 characters long. Longest method name, it's like nobody can really read it. I obviously don't know it from the top of my head.
What about int pointer?
Okay.
Isn't this the worst name? Why not? It's not a pointer. It's not an int. It has some arithmetic operations, but not others.
The worst API we ever shipped.
What about the instance method on a static class?
So that's just bad testing.
So it's get text effect character index from the text source character index.
Oh, no wonder.
Say this one more time.
Seriously?
Get text effect character index from text source character index. It's a lovely method in the system Windows Media.
I'll look it up in APIs of .NET.
All right. So IEnumerable support on MRFT. Christoph, I hope you have some context here.
Yeah, so it's not. I mean, it's not like we. So we cannot implement the interface on span, on memory, because spans cannot implement interfaces. On memory we could, but I kind of, people want to use it to interop with existing APIs, but imagine that it's memory of bytes. Like enumerating by single byte is such a wrong thing to do, performance-wise.
Well, I mean, it depends on which T you choose, right? Nothing prevents you from using a struct that is large.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of, it's providing APIs that people kind of shouldn't use except for interop scenarios. So I think in one of the comments I suggested that maybe we can provide like a bridge API.
Yeah, but
instead of implementing it directly on memory, just, actually this is the proposed API. So the title hasn't yet changed. So the proposed API is that we provide an extension method that takes memory and wraps it in IEnumerable. I think that's fine because it's more like a bridge than we implement IEnumerable directly on memory and then people, for each it, and then we have to extract enumerators and then the feature just explodes.
Well, it's also probably more efficient to do it this way for the majority of use cases. I mean, if you have a method that accepts an IEnumerable and you wanted to give a memory to it, if memory implemented the interface, we would first be boxing to pass the memory in, and then we would call getEnumerator on it, and it would allocate a new enumerator object. By having this toEnumerable extension method, the enumerable that we return can also double as the enumerator.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
except that's not what we do, right?
No, that's the design that we would implement.
Yeah, but that's not what he's proposing. He's proposing to actually return that.
Well, but this thing, so the object that implements this IEnumerable of T would also implement IEnumerator of T, and the implementation of enumerable would just return this.
Oh,
that's what all, like when C# iterators generate, like when the compiler generates an enumerable, that's what it does.
I see. I was thinking that you talk about the non-allocating enumerators, but I know that's yeah. Okay.
There's partial implementation down there, so that might be clear.
Okay, so initially I just read the title and I'm thinking like people still push for implementation of the interface, but I think the extension method is reasonable.
See, like the example that they provide here with the take memory of float, like is not necessarily super efficient either, right?
Yeah, but if it's a bridging scenario, then it's fine. You kind of.
Yeah. Okay. So sure. Like I'm just thinking, like one of the tensor things that we're working on, like is effectively super large matrix.
Yeah.
Where you easily have 40,000 by 40,000 by 40,000 components, and you I don't think you want to enumerate them sequentially. That seems like bad design. It almost seems like what you really want is like some sort of super create batch stuff.
Well,
that,
so the thing, this, yeah, this is true for all bridging APIs. Bridging APIs, that's the definition, correct? They are not the most efficient, not the best APIs, but they let you keep going while you wait for the platform to adapt to new exchange types. So in this case, you can imagine that at some point there would be, create batch that doesn't take IEnumerable. It takes memory of T, and then it uses the indexer. I mean, gets a span and uses the indexer to, copy the floats.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what's fair is that TNTK is a different library from the tensor libraries, and we don't control both at the same time.
So the only question I would have is, do we want the bridge APIs to be in the main assembly? I think it's fine. It's just one thing to think about. Because they will stay there forever.
Quite frankly, given what our team does, whatever we do stays forever.
Yeah.
It's very, even if you put it in a different assembly, we just have to maintain that one forever then.
More assemblies. We've got plenty.
Yeah, I mean, to me, even extension methods in the same namespace seem fine because you force people to call a method, right?
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, it's not a performance trap in the sense that you implicitly do a cast and you don't see it, right?
Right.
It's very. You basically say two enumerable and then people should be like, "Holy cow, what are you doing?"
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
there are already methods we have for interop with other systems, but we would, if we saw it in some type loop somewhere, we would encourage people not to call it like memory.toArray. So this doesn't seem. This seems like just another method that's useful for integrating with the rest of your systems, but that we would encourage people to find alternatives for if it was a really hot path.
So what would we do in scenarios where the only thing you have is a span of T? Is this the recommendation then? You copy it to something and then you return that.
If what?
So let's say.
Oh, let's say I have a span and I want to interrupt with APIs that.
You have to copy, right? There's nothing we can do with span itself. Right?
Well, so okay, there's another. You can pin. You can. Oh.
One. Okay, let's keep counting. One.
So another thing you can do. Oh, is Steve back?
Should be.
Yeah, I'm here now.
So another thing you can do to interrupt with existing APIs when you have a span is to pin the span. And if the APIs take pointers, you can interrupt. That's another interrupt possibility.
Yeah, I'm thinking when the receiver deliberately says IEnumerable of something, then you have to copy, right? Yeah, I think this is the way it is.
I mean, there are probably some pretty hacky things you could do that combine both what you said, Emo, and what Christoph said. I mean, you could imagine pinning a span and then creating an enumerable over the pinned region, over the pointer and the length. You just need to be very careful with managing your lifetimes.
Right. Don't we have that? Didn't we have an unmanaged IEnumerable at some point? It's very good I saw that at some point. That it detects the pointer, I think. Maybe I just saw it when I had the scope. That is true. So then the other question is, what do you mean by language support for span? For each T in span?
Come on, I commented on this 13 days ago. You think my memory can hold?
The issue is right now, so if you look at array, for example, array provides an enumerator, get enumerator, it implements IEnumerable and whatnot, but the C# compiler actually recognizes arrays specially, and if you look at the IL that's generated, it generates the same IL as if you wrote for int I equals 0, I is less than array.length, I++. we could, for span, we could expose an enumerator that returns a ref struct enumerator and so on. But if, you know, it'd be nice if the language similarly recognized span as it did for array and generated the same kind of IL.
I believe we talked about this before for an readable array as well. I think basically at the time what we said is we said this probably should be like some sort of attribute we put on the type that basically says, you know, indexer and length is there, so please provide a for loop. Something like that. I forgot what the name of the attribute was that somebody proposed, but because realistically the only contract that the compiler cares about is it has to be able to get the length and have an indexer, right?
Well, and then the length doesn't change while you.
Well, I mean, that's just.
But it needs to find out where to fetch it.
That's
right.
what I'm saying. You probably need an attribute to say like, so that the compiler doesn't just magically write a for loop just because you have length and indexer.
Yeah.
But basically, the contract is you put the attribute, and then the only requirement for the type is you have to provide a length, you have to provide an indexer, and then.
Can you use the read-only stuff already? So that if you mark the type read-only and has length, then you know that there's less chance it has some idle side effect.
Well, I mean, span wouldn't be read-only, right? Like, it's just that the length is invariant, but the indexer, like, the values can still change, right? So the type is, strictly speaking, not read-only, right? It's just that length should be... Is it true? Yeah, I think the only thing you need to have is, like, length needs to be invariant.
And read-only, I don't think it has the same semantics at all, because it just means the fields in this instance cannot change. But let's say the field points to something, which gives you the length value every time you access it. Then your type is read-only, but the length can still change.
Okay, that's okay.
I mean, strictly speaking, like length, I mean, like, I'm not even sure that length needs to be immutable, strictly speaking, because if you for each over an object and you change the object state to have a different length, enumeration will also not succeed, will blow up. Right?
Depends.
I mean, that's how most types implement it, right? They have a version or something, right? Like, I mean, it's just that you trade error case A against error case B, right? That's really all it means. But like, it will not be. But it seems like this should be a separate like proposal. Steven, did you file a language request for that, or like, did you just loop in nets and flood in the hope that they will do it?
I CC'd them, and that was the extent of my involvement. But I certainly could open one.
That would be amazing. Because I think we talked about this before, and it seems like something that's easy. For some definition of easy.
I'll open something.
All right.
We have stuck video apparently.
Then I think this one, yeah, that's normal. The video is always well.
Now it moved.
Yeah, I just made it black, but apparently, like, I have to actually.
Oh, the video is actually stuck, not the screen.
Oh, for fuck's sake. There we go. Alright. So then this one is approved as proposed, I suppose.
And we already have a memory extensions type.
Well, I think Ason put it in memory extensions because he's planning to rename span extensions to memory extensions. So we have span extensions that will become memory extensions.
Okay.
You have it, that is probably not necessary.
It makes you probably right.
And you put comma before but in English language.
I know. I've given up on common rules anyway. English common rules are completely insane. In German it's very easy. If you can clap to it and you make a logical pause at that point, that's where you put the comma. Anyway. Read-only memory of char. That was the thing I think we had this email thread yesterday about where I went back and forth.
Yeah, so right now we're introducing these types: span of t, read-only span of t, memory of t, read-only memory of t, and we're using read-only span or read-only char rather, as a way to slice strings. And arrays and everything else, but memory can't be used to, or read-only memory can't be used to slice strings today, and it shouldn't be that hard or much of a perf hit to make that happen. We've already had requests for things like a string segment, and that's effectively what a read-only memory of char is. So we can just augment read-only memory of char's implementation to support string, and then we can use it for slicing. We can add extension methods on read-only memory of char for performing string-like operations, and so on. But the kind of the bare bones pieces that we would need are, one, from an API perspective, are something that lets you get a read-only memory of char from a string, and then ideally something that lets you extract a string from a read-only memory char if it was wrapping one, just like we have try get array on memory and read-only memory. So I'm suggesting we add basically those two methods, and then we can figure out subsequently what those string-like extensions would be. On memory extensions and as read-only memory, that takes a string and returns a read-only memory char. And then I wasn't entirely sure where to put it, but on something like memory marshal, an extension method on read-only memory char that gave you back the string if it had one.
Sounds good to me, as long as the regression is not such that it kills Kestrel.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I don't even know if Kestrel uses read-only memory char, but the implementation can guard any additional type checks behind a type test for type of t equals type of char. So this should have literally zero impact on read-only memory of byte and stuff like that. And then for read-only memory of char, it will likely involve one type test against string for operations like .span, .try get array, and so forth. And a type test against string is like, another 3 assembly instructions or something. So hopefully it won't be measurable, but that's why I put the caveat at the bottom of my post here, which is, we can approve these APIs, but then when we go and add them as part of adding the implementation, we should verify that we don't, measurably impact other scenarios.
So, this is my question. What do you mean by killing performance of Kestrel? I mean, are they using read-only memory of char today?
Well, no. So this has the potential of slowing down read-only memory of byte performance. Well, because memory has 3 fields. The first field is object,
right?
And we kind of switch. We do. Memory is basically a union,
right,
in disguise. So today we do the switch on the sign of the length. So it also has a length field,
right.
And if it's negative, if it's positive, it's an array. The object is an array. If it's negative, it's basically like this lifetime memory manager thingy. Now we're gonna add a third mode to memory.
Object then points to the
to the owned memory.
I see.
So now we're gonna add a third type that can be set to this object field, and we don't have a bit to track. So we will have to do a type check, not just change a sign of an int, which is super efficient. So Steve is saying that yes, we will have to do a type check, but potentially the type check will not actually kick in for the case where it's memory of bytes.
Yeah, my hypothesis or my assertion is that it won't even be in the assembly because it'll be removed by the JIT.
Right. No, that makes sense. So what happens then if we would do something like, let's say we have a UTF-8 string at some point, right? And then the question is, what's the representation like? I think you proposed similar to string, like which is basically a class but special because the whole data is inline and all of that.
Yeah.
How would I slice that guy, and what would the return type be?
Yeah. So are you on the email thread with me, Steve, and Jan? We are discussing exactly this. So basically, if we do this, what we could say, read-only memory of char is our representation of slice string. Can we do the same thing for UTF-8 string? And today, I don't believe we can. And the reason is that we have this type char. Basically, the type says it's text. Correct? Like, there's no reason to use char and for something that is not text.
Oh, so you mean literally like not only just read-only memory, but read-only memory of
char basically says it's text. It's a buffer containing text.
Well, not only that, you're also saying you have the 16-bit one.
Yeah, exactly. It has some other things, but at least it says it's text. Right. Well, that's not the case for read-only memory of byte. Read-only memory of byte can be either UTF-8 text, or it can be some random set of bytes. And suddenly, if we add a bunch of extension methods to operate on UTF-8 strings, they would show up on random byte arrays, and like that would be pretty bad, in my opinion.
Well, strictly speaking, you can make it anything. Right? I mean, we could also say string is read-only memory of byte. It's just that it's very inconvenient to do that.
Yeah, and then it would have the same problem. Right. So one of the solutions to this is we introduce UTF-8 coding unit type, and it just wraps byte. And now we could do exactly the same thing, except it introduces a type that is just a wrapper over byte. It probably introduces some performance hit when you operate over those than bytes. Like our runtime, our JIT is not as good with handling structs as it's with built-in types. So
that makes sense. I mean, the other question I wanted to ask is what happens if we were to do something similar to what Java did with their string, where they have not UTF-8, but this other weird encoding that effectively means it's, single byte.
So that works for if your objective is to minimize the memory occupied by strings. Right. What they did is it works. What it doesn't work is for web traffic, because it is UTF-8. It cannot be Latin 1.
Right. I think on their side it's not a global switch for all strings. I think it's a per instance thing on their side, right? You can have still little UTF-8s.
But it only supports Latin. It doesn't support UTF-8.
No, I get that. I'm saying so you take one of those instances of string, you call the new method as read-only memory, and you get back a read-only memory of char. How is that going to work when we would do that thing? Like, it wouldn't work at all, right? Because we would now basically get a buffer where you logically assume 2 bytes or 1 total.
Yeah.
And then they're
so basically, what somebody brought it up on the email thread where we are discussing this. That basically this is an API that leaks the representation of our string.
Right.
But Jan commented, and I fully agree with him, that like we leak it in so many places that all right, we solved the other problems, we solved this one, and this one doesn't make the situation any different.
Yeah, I mean, we already have as read-only span, which has the exact same issue.
Read-only memory of span.
As read-only span.
Oh, we already have extension methods that, given a string, give you back a read-only span of char?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah.
So you have it over there, yeah.
So in that case, would we also add your try get string? Probably not, because we cannot get it, correct?
Well, I see what you're saying. Get the string from span. Yeah, I don't know how to implement it.
So even what I just said is like, I was asking whether we should add the try get string for read-only span as well, but we can't because we don't have that pointer anymore, right?
Right, we can't fish it out.
Runtime feature that probably would add cost to everything.
It's the same reason we don't have try get array for span.
Right, because you lost it. Yeah, that makes sense. That's unfortunate, but I guess that's the way it is. So then, regarding your alternative things, like why did you like it just aesthetics, or is there a reason for these other alternatives? Because the first
Mostly, you know, what kind of pattern do we want here? Try get array has the benefit that we already have array segments. So rather than having 3 out arguments, you know, we just have the 1 for the array segment. So would we want to do something similar? We could use a value tuple. We could return the string and just have 2 out arguments. I'm just sort of figuring out what the pattern is we want.
One easy fix could be you just take the same method signatures that you have, but instead of having 3 out arguments, you have 1 single out argument that gives you a value tuple, right? That would be the more
that's also possible.
Straightforward translation. But then, I don't know, like considering how easy out var arguments are now with C#, I personally don't mind them as much as I did.
Yeah, I'm fine with the one that I sort of proposed as the primary. I just wanted to highlight that there were alternatives as well.
I actually prefer the original one because it makes it super clear that you're getting 3 return values and you should honor the offset and the count.
Well,
the alternative, I can imagine people just like, oh, I'm gonna just pass something for offset and the count and then just use the string that is returned.
Maybe. I mean, the only benefit that I see for doing this, either as a return value or as an out, is the fact that if you call this method like 3 times in your function, you basically have to create like some sort of naming convention where you say s1, offset 1, count 1, right? And then it becomes a mess, right? Versus if you have one thing, you just call them, you know, foo and bar.
Oh,
you say foo.text, foo.offset.
But you're talking about the tuple solution.
Yes.
Yeah. That I actually don't mind the tuple. I was more commenting on the one that just returns a string. That seems to me like
the original and the first one.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Returning string instead of bool.
Yeah, I would not split it. I would make a decision and then would all return them.
I think, you know, we're talking about using read-only-memory char as the string sort of subset, and so the only time when you would be accessing the string and the offset and the count would be you're almost certainly about to call some other method that takes them, and so you're calling this purely to basically pass the data along. So you're probably not going to be in a situation, you know, frequently where you want to have lots of these things pending on your stack all at the same time.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And also, I think it follows that try pattern more because it returns a boolean versus the tuple one. You know, like I feel we should be using more tuples, but it's not a try method.
You would have to check.
Like there's no boolean there, and then it's not clear. Like, is the string null? Is that the pattern? What if the thing that we return in the tuple is not a reference type? And like.
Yeah, as I said, like to me, like the only thing that will be sensible is basically taking this thing and still returning bool, but then returning a single out with all 3 as a tuple, right? That would be the most straightforward translation from the try pattern with tuples. But
or a nullable tuple.
I'm not sure I'm a fan of nullable try. Like also like that signature, I think is not very readable. That when you have like 3 values, parentheses around them, and a question mark, and it's like I don't know what this thing does anymore. Yeah.
You need to program more in Rust.
No, there's a reason I'm not doing that because I'm like.
No, but it, you know,
like
it basically your bar for, you know, various symbols is now adjusted to the proper level.
No, I've read enough C++, so I think I already have my mind spoiled. And I've also read VB code, so I've seen both extremes of operators everywhere and text everywhere. So, I don't know. Seems to me I would settle on this one, given that we know where we are right now.
All right.
Any other concerns on like type names or locations? I think we settled on memory marshal for any sort of
dangerous
operation that could be potentially. Well, this one wouldn't be dangerous, but it would just be weird. Like it's not an encouraged pattern, I guess. It's interrupt only.
Well, isn't it the same for try get array?
Yes. don't know, where's try_get_array? That's a good question, actually.
Well, so there's two. Today we have memory.try_get_array, and we have read_only_memory.dangerous_try_get_array. And we talked about moving the dangerous ones to this memory marshal class. This isn't actually dangerous, and in fact, I was proposing creating it as an extension method so that it would show up on read_only_memory char right alongside try_get_array.
On which type is the get array? Because I can't find it. Try_get_array, I mean.
Memory of t.try_get_array.
Why am I not indexing this?
To new?
No, I think I'm indexing, I'm going to say I'm indexing CoreFX. It's CoreFX master, right?
Yeah, you're probably indexing the old packages because they have names that pretend to be newer, and Wes doesn't want to fix it.
So Wes, how do we? Don't I have it built up for CoreFX, which I'm indexing? I'm not indexing packages for sure.
You're indexing a draft from build.
So why don't I see new things in master then?
You should, if it's part of NetCore app. Which one is you missing?
For NetCore app, try_get_array is implemented in core CLR.
Should still be there.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to double check because I have this a few times and like I'm starting to distrust the data that I'm getting here.
Possible that the thing is broken on the check.
Probably.
I'm gonna have to drop off in a few minutes, and I'll be back in a little while.
All right. So then. So the conclusion was that the dangerous one. The dangerous one is from what?
Well, so there's no controversy, there's no problem. We have dangerous APIs, and they are in memory marshal.
No, like what Steven just said is a dangerous try_get_array, and then there is get
So
array.
let me keep going.
Yeah,
so
okay.
the dangerous one is in marshal. We should like stop. Now the problem is that we are proposing that we will add this one,
Right.
which is not really dangerous, depending how you look at it. But this one is equivalent to try_get_array.
Yes.
So I think now that I know we've renamed span extensions to memory extensions, I think this one should probably just live in memory extensions.
Both of these then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They are still a bit dangerous because they let you access data outside of the memory slice.
Right. You're not required to adhere to the offset and count.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure I classify that as dangerous though. It's just.
Well, if somebody passed you, memory and they want you to write to some slice, but now you fish out the array and you write to something that they didn't expect you to write, it's kind of dangerous.
True, but I mean that to me is in the exact same ballpark as any of our string array methods today when you don't pass in the correct offset and length, right? I mean like you're not doing anything dangerous as in like you're crashing the process, you just get garbage output. So
But that's in your code, it's a problem in your code. You pass the wrong indices. This is, I created, like a small section of memory and I passed it to you.
Right.
I expect you to only write to this one, but you wrote to something else. Now when your method returns, I notice that my data is overwritten. Because you...
Right, but I think it's not really any different than an existing method today, like array.sort, that takes an array, offset, and length. If array.sort, it could certainly choose to ignore the offset and count that you passed in, even though you passed in the correct offset and count that you wanted.
Sure.
And we don't call that like dangerous sort.
Yeah, no, that's called bogus sort of thing.
We have a comment from Andy on the floor below that he's considering as well option of bool, returning bool, but instead of free variables, free out variables having tuple, out tuple.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing this. I mean, we could do that. What that would look like? That would be
Without outs, yeah.
move these guys.
And his point being that you will usually not need to deconstruction. So.
Let's call this string segment for the paragraph. But yeah. I'll just segment. declare that as a string. I mean, we could do that. I don't know. I'm not sure you are helping or hurting. Like, maybe I'm too new to tuples, but I don't find that particularly better for some definition of better. I think tuples are generally more useful in return type position than there are in out positions because you can deconstruct them and other things. Like this one is like, you have a variable and you have to say segment dot value or segment dot offset, right?
Well, no, I think the person who made the comment is arguing that the construction also works for out parameters, which I'm not sure whether it does or not. I just don't know.
I'm pretty sure it does not. I may be wrong, but I don't know how that would look like syntactically. Well, I guess you would just say maybe. Well,
So let's, assuming that it would work, instead of you having to write out var value, out var offset, out var count, you would say out, open parentheses, value offset count, close parentheses. You wouldn't have to name it segment.
Are we typing? Can't see it.
Yeah, because I cannot do this at the same time.
This suggests that you can deconstruct and call out and then string val offset int count.
Do you even have to specify the types?
I think when you say var, you don't.
But in general, for tuple, you don't need to specify the types when you receive it.
I think these are the three verbs, right? This is the one we can all understand. This is the one that is the most logical when you have one tuple, and then this is the one that will be the deconstructed version of it.
Yeah, I wonder if for the deconstructed hypothetical syntax, you even need to say var.
But then you would have to specify the types, right? So in that case, you would have to say.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, maybe you have to say var.
Then you have to make this a declaration. You would have to say, subsections. I think you would have to say string s int offset int count.
Maybe vars.
At which point I'm like, okay, now I'm not sure. That's something. Alright. Honestly, I would say let's just go with this one here, because it seems to be the easiest one. I don't know. I just don't see how tuple is particularly straightforward, useful, or all this.
Yeah, looks good to me.
This is going into QC territory, which I'm not.
Memory extensions already does exist, or are we gonna create that?
That's the span extensions that's gonna be renamed.
Okay, so we're gonna rename it.
And you're saying try get array already exists.
Yeah, try get array exists, but it's not an extension.
Why is it not an extension?
because it can be on memory of T. Versus this one cannot be on memory of T, because it's specific to memory of char.
What? You can declare this either way, right?
You put it on
No.
span of on memory of T. You want it on a memory of char only, right? So you need specification. That's why it needs to be extension methods.
Oh, you're saying it's okay, I get it now. It's an instance method. I thought you said it's a static method that is not an extension. That's what I'm saying. Why is it an extension? Okay. Let's see. Read only.
So I missed the discussion around the renaming to memory extension. So we have plenty of span extensions in there. So
We're gonna so it was last week, we decided we want to just have one type for all extension methods.
and then we're gonna go with the most highest level, or
What?
why not span extensions then?
Oh, because there are more types than just span. So it's weird to have span extensions, and most of the extension methods are actually not for span.
Okay.
They are for memory and
So if majority, we're saying majority is for memory, then
yeah, except in this context, memory means the DLL.
memory means what?
Yeah, so the type is called memory extensions, not because it extends type called memory, but because it lives in system memory.dll.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
This is just to
Bridge all features in one.
Oh, okay. The second one is extending memory as well, read-only memories.
yeah. I'm just saying, like, how we, the reason for its type being called memory is not because it extends memory, but because it lives in memory.dll.
I see. Which seems fine.
Okay.
Because IEnumerable is not even marked as extensions, but there's no type called IEnumerable that we
Exactly.
apply anything to, right? Alright, so then let's go with that.
Jeez, my iPhone is using so much power since I updated to the new OS.
Are you running legacy hardware?
Yes,
Yeah, that's your phone.
I know. Somebody told me that. I need to update to the new hardware.
You're on the 6 Plus, correct?
No, I'm on 6. 6 Plus.
So you're not even on an S. So
Correct.
you are in dangerous territory.
Yeah, I know.
It's behind the Apple Meet.
I know.
Devices that will fly.
I know.
Got video stuck again?
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's a thing.
Alright. Video's back up. So, Christoph, you wanted to do that, so...
Yes, so at the last review, we talked about this API. It was rejected because it had overloads for span of byte, like specialization overloads, and also had some constraint to struct that is not necessary. So I just removed the overloads and removed the constraint. Oh, you see, your comment is there. Looks good. Why do we need the struct constraint? Removed. Why do we have the byte overload? Removed.
So why do we need this type? Removed?
Last index of.
That's my foot, by the way.
There was a third comment. Are you like sending some signals to Imo?
I'm trying to put my
Right.
feet somewhere, and Imo is in the way.
Imo, what was your third comment?
Sorry, I was distracted. Somebody was fumbling feet with me.
Okay. So can you show me that your third comment?
My third comment.
Where is-
the last index of?
Oh, last index of any. There's last index of any added. You see, like everything, all your concerns are now resolved.
Are we going to implement them, or is that the final shape?
That's the real implementation. We actually don't care about these methods working.
I have to parse this in my head again. So we have last index of any. So last index of where we have span of t. And you can either ask for a single value or for multiple values. Okay. And we do the same thing for read-only the extension. We have to do that. The last index of A specialize. Is it all pattern usually? That we only go up to 3 pages now?
It depends.
We never go beyond 3.
For funcs and actions, we went to 8.
No, I mean like for the params overloads that are not
Params overloads generally 3.
It's generally 3. I'm just thinking. How do we implement them? Do we stack a lock and then call the other one?
Stack alloc what?
Like how do we implement the ones with the fixed arguments?
Fixed.
For like a format string and stuff like that, we stack out. We have a structure that we push them into.
Where are the fixed arguments?
So like how do you implement this thing here? I suppose you're stack allocating a read-only span with 2 and then call this one, or like how do you do that?
Oh, no, I would assume it would be optimized implementation. That basically, finds value 0 and then tries. Well, yeah, this one could be actually vectorized. It just creates 2 vector masks, one with value 0, one with value 1, and then search is vectorized.
Okay.
Good.
In fact, that one probably can be implemented in terms of last index of a single value. It just finds this, value 0, value 1, and then returns the largest index. Could be, maybe not. You kind of want to do it in parallel. Because if the span is very long and value 0 doesn't exist, it would be inefficient. Yeah, it probably needs to be re-implemented, but using vectorized search.
So are we doing any specialization for bytes, or are we just using generic one?
So, people have argued that we don't. That JIT is so good that it can specialize it for us. And they've done measurements, and it looks like it's actually the case. And if we ever discover that we do have a problem, then we can just add the byte overloads. You should say, looks good as proposed after incorporating my comments.
Well, that goes without saying. Right, so now we have wait time, which is unfortunately.
Call them for 11:30?
Well, they had a meeting until 11:30, so.
Oh, crap.
Do
Do we want to look at it maybe first ourselves, or do we want to wait?
25 minutes, maybe.
I figured out why the catalog's not uploaded. It doesn't have the APIs. So that's exactly the reason why what I'm doing right now on the side, which is trying to fix the core CLR build. The core CLR build hasn't actually produced a build for a while, so you haven't got the new APIs public.
Oh, because yeah, I don't have a build. I mean, there's that.
That's what I'm working on right now.
All right, enjoy.
Actually, I think I promised that I'm gonna copy the latest proposal to the top, and I didn't do that. So
Good job.
So I'm just trying to remember the last proposal. I know we already passed it, but is this last index of gonna work with the nullable types?
Last index with nullable types, you mean when the T is a nullable? Yes, as long as the nullable type implements IEquatable of T, which nullable probably doesn't. I don't know if it does or it doesn't. Does nullable of T implement IEquatable?
Yeah, it does. But it means you. How do you specify the type arguments? Because it's part of T. Okay, then is T the nullable T or non-nullable T?
Well, so if your span is span of nullable of int, and nullable of int implemented this interface that it doesn't, as Imo said,
Right.
then it would just work. It would find the index of the right nullable value. You could access the value in the span, you would get nullable value. You would still have to check.
What we're pointing out, like the
Yeah,
way
but then I guess if you are looking for the value and you pass in only as int, like value, I guess it probably will do the conversion, right?
Right.
No, because well, you're saying the parameter, the value that you're looking for would be nullable int. So you would have to pass nullable int, and yes, there is automatic cast. So
yeah, because you call this instance method on, let's say, span of nullable of int, let's say, right? And then you pass in 42 for this, and the compiler will convert that to T, which at this point would be in question mark. And then, yeah, so long the type implements IEquatable, it would find the right thing. I mean, the way nullable works on our side is that it's not like DB nullable, right? Where like if both are null or both are not null, like you get the right.
which is interesting. Why does nullable of T does not implement IEquatable of T?
I have no idea. I think that seems weird to me as well.
You can open a new issue.
Oh, you know why it doesn't?
Mm.
Because it doesn't have any operators. They're all lifted by the compiler.
Oh no, it doesn't, because then the T would have to implement IEquatable.
That is also true, yes. Same with tuples, actually. There's a discussion now on equality on tuples.
Yes.
And they're proposing that the compiler will effectively rewrite them in such a way that it says if the first one equals the second one, and the first one equals the first one, second one the second one, the third one, and so on and so forth. So it generates this giant expression essentially, because that's the only way they can make sure they call the right operators. You cannot implement IEquatable on tuples either.
So you said the nullable doesn't implement IEquatable.
Right.
So then you cannot use nullable with this API.
Correct.
Correct.
So
To be fair, you cannot use
so you,
API
so,
with anything.
so you need to mimic what is done in Link, where you need to copy this and add question mark for all these APIs to sort of.
Say it again, what?
Well, in Link has the two versions of all the overloads, where one is with nullable and second one is without.
Do they?
Yeah, just search for, let's say, my max or min or.
Yeah, they do. Not for all of them, because for some they don't have to, but anything that does comparisons, they do.
So one additional way to solve this problem is to just add an overload that takes what is the type that actually provides, like that equates to things,
You mean passing in a compare,
like a
essentially?
comparer, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I think it's equality compare.
Yeah, equality comparer. Exactly. But honestly,
But
I'm
that
not
would
sure
be-
whether that's a.
It would
I've
be
never
also
run
like horribly
into a
inefficient.
scenario where I wanted to store nullables in a span. Maybe. Do people store nullables in arrays?
Oh.
Well, if you have,
Well,
if you have array of nullable ints, it's quite common.
But it's kind of wasteful.
Oh, it's for database people. It's like whatever they know.
No, like I think in LINQ it occurs pretty frequently because of the way you write the code, right? You would say like something like select this thing and you do a try cast, and then later on you say where this thing is not null. But I would say that by the time you call toArray or like toList, I don't think you have like a sequence of nullables left. I mean, that would be weird. Even in databases, I mean, I've done a decent amount of database programming, and I've rarely had a shit ton of nullables because most data structures you already have nullability built into them because it's reference types anyway, and you try to convert them, and then you have effectively only the atomic values like, I don't know, birth dates and stuff like that is nullable, but then they're usually properties of some larger objects, but you really have like, I don't know, an array of, nullable ins or array of nullable pools is not super frequent. But I mean, to Christoph's point, I mean, like you can, I think there's no way for us to provide this API efficiently, right? I mean, like the only way for us to do that for nullables would be to actually have overloads for nullables. Because the equality compare one is horribly inefficient, because we have to do a partial dispatch for every single freaking comparison, right? So I think if we cared about nullable being first class, we would have to add the overload.
You know what would be a relatively easy way to implement it?
What?
Like we know.
You create a struct that contains nullable. Yes. You implement the interface on this struct. And as long as you have the right layout, you just interpret cast the span to the span of those structs. That is actually efficient and it would work. And you just need to be careful about padding.
Yes.
Because it depends in your original array where you have the nullables. You probably have padding. That wraps the nullable.
What's nullable? It's like it's T followed by a bool, I suppose, right? Yeah. I mean, that would be the workaround, right? Which would be better than.
You can do so much with free interpret cast.
Yes. You can also hang yourself in so many different ways.
There's a language for that. It's not C#.
Something C.
You think it's not C#.
I think it's called cross.
It's called dangerous cast. What is the method? What is the method called?
Unsafe dot something. Unsafe dot cast.
No. We have it in. I think we have it on SpanExtensions as well.
Yeah. We added something horrible.
Non-portable cast.
Yeah, that's almost as bad as C++ is. Like underscores, angle brackets, like reinterpret cast and like static cast.
We should have a language syntax for it.
And then those guys come along and say it has to work in C, and we have to remove all those. Yes. But it's stuck again, I guess.
Yeah, I can. This is
Still trying.
I don't know what the problem is.
Well, you kicked out Stephen only twice, so that's okay.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I counted 3 times, but who's counting?
You count what?
You are.
No, I am counting. See?
But you don't know when he's kicked out.
Oh, can you rejoin yourself? I thought that the kickout was hard, that Imo has to do something.
No, the call is on hold when that happens. Yeah. So I guess the conclusion then is we don't have to special case nullable in any of our APIs. If you really, really want to do it, you can do it yourself.
No, I would say if we discover that this is people comment that it says scenario, then we think what the right solution is. The reinterpret cast is a bit like wacky. I would not say, oh.
No, I get that. I get.
Well, if somebody comments and says, geez, I want this API now, we will tell them the workaround, but then we should add API.
The problem that I have with this is that it's basically, it's a recipe in the sense that you basically have to double the entire API service where you convert.
I know.
And so, like, the likelihood of us getting that right, it's not very high. We will miss a few overloads here and there, I'm sure. And then for those cases, it's like you can unblock yourself by just doing the thing. You don't have to re-implement the API, essentially, right? But that may not be too bad. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be willing to say right now I don't think it's a scenario until proven otherwise. Like, I mean, arrays of nullables should not be very common.
0 or 1 element. So it's an array of arrays.
Not sure we'll call this an array, but yeah.
That is what nullable is.
It's not quite that wasteful.
In fact, it should implement IEnumerable.
Oh. We should not let you design APIs.
You want to ask him just to write books?
Well, I'm not quoting this famous statement, but yeah, there is. Those who can do, those who can't.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you're super nasty today.
Couldn't be the theory. All right.
Might be waiting around the corner for you.
Oh, you already did.
You will see how many people after, like, I'm going to file an issue, implement IEnumerable on nullable of T. It's going to receive lots of votes.
This is what's going to make UWP great again.
Sure. Then you can, if it implements IEnumerable of T, you can call link methods on it. You can say first or default.
Oh, God. Talking about efficiency in code. You want to sit over here?
No, this time on purpose.
You're closer to your feet when you do that.
And you know why.
All right, so
12 more minutes. Hit refresh.
Oh, you edited?
I copy-pasted the latest stuff from bottom.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that thing now. Register.
So, what does this API do? What is it for?
So the way DbProviderFactories work today is, so the scenario goes like this. Imagine you are writing something like EF, right, or some OR mapper. You want to allow your customers to effectively use any database backend, right? But what you do have to do is you have to create essentially connection objects, command objects, reader objects, and you don't know which ones. So you can't write the new statement yourself. Now we do have abstractions, so we have the DB reader, the DB connection, the DB command, but somebody needs to be giving you a factory that gives you one of those. This is what the DB provider is. Now the problem is now, well, how do you get the DB provider, like the factory itself, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to new up a DB provider factory in my own code, because that now means my OR mapper has to depend on every single possible ADO implementation that exists. Mm-hmm. So what I'd rather do is I basically say, well, you could just write, one entry method that accepts a factory, but then the problem is the customer has to new it up. And for the most part, what you do is you have string-based configuration. So ideally, they give you just a string that says SQL or, SQLite, or whatever the case might be. And then by the time you actually have to do something with that, with the database, you basically go to this type, provide the string, and then you get back the factory. So it's effectively a global registration for the basic maps strings to concrete providers. The way it works on .NET Framework is that we come batteries included for the things that ship in the framework, ODBC, SQL, and whatnot. And you can extend the ones that are available by writing sections to the app config file. So but on core we don't have configuration, right? So there's no way for you to register those things, and that's where the new APIs kick in. So you can write some code that says, register this factory under that name, and then you would have a model where the application would take a dependency on the SQLite package, and then they would call SQLite.register, and then SQLite just calls these APIs with the right strings and then registers them, and that's whatever else it needs to do.
So why is this method? They are static methods. Why aren't they on DbProviderFactory?
Well, DbProviderFactories already exists in .NET Framework. That type already has shipped.
And we cannot add APIs to it. Is that?
No. I'm saying there's two APIs, right? There's the factory.
Yes.
And then there's the factories.
Yeah. Why don't we?
And factories already shipped. So the way .NET Framework shipped today is these APIs exist on .NET Framework.
I understand. All of the methods
Yes.
are static methods.
Yes.
They could be on DbProviderFactory.
Yes, I'm saying that's not the design that they have done in the past. So like what we're reviewing is this. Right?
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I missed that.
So those are already there. So like given that you have get factory on
Makes
this
it
side,
nice. Yeah.
kind of want to have register.
So register. Okay, so you can register. I see.
And here we go again.
Did we drop Stephen?
Of course we did. Oh, nice. It's actually number 5. You're not doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think when it's more complicated, there's no 2 people on the call, so you definitely have to double the last 2, I think. Anyway.
The video is stuck, of course.
I fixed that. So I forgot what the reason for invariant name was, but it seems like what we want to call this provider invariant name rather than invariant name, because that's the name that the other one.
But why does it even why is it so complicated? Why is it called invariant name and not just like ID, for example?
Well, I mean, that's the name they've picked here, right? So.
I see it again. It already exists. Okay,
but
okay.
I think there was a reason why they had invariant name, because apparently there was some reason for that. Because apparently the provider has a name as well, but that's not the right one. There was some.
Then it should be called the right name.
Well, that's what provider invariant name I guess stands for. So they have these 2 things, they're logically overloads. I guess unregistered should probably be unregistered factory, I suppose.
Probably.
So one thing that is not consistent, it's called provider invariant name in the existing methods, but it's called invariant name in the new methods.
Yeah, I think we should just have the same argument everywhere.
And then we should find out if it should leak into the last method name, get factor invariant name.
I would also suggest that these 2 should be aligned. I would probably call this factory type assembly qualified name rather than just factory assembly qualified name, because you're basically designating the type name.
Also, I wonder, like there's a generic method that takes both invariant name and the type of the factory. Why do we need that? Like if you know the name of if you know the type, then why do you need to?
Yeah, I think that was the problem, because effectively it's
independent.
Yes. So like apparently, so the way it works is you can register the SQL DbProviderFactory under the name Christoph, and you can ask for that. So if I just give you the type, you don't know what key you want to register it under.
No. This is try-get factory method.
Right.
It's not about the registration.
No.
I'm trying to retrieve a factory.
Right.
Well, I already know the type of the factory.
Yes.
Why do I need to specify the name?
Yeah, because you cannot infer one from the other. So somebody may have registered the SQL provider factory under Christoph.
Yes.
So you know when you throw the try get one, you want to get the SQL one, but you don't know just giving the type name SQL DB provider factory, the API cannot infer that the key was Christoph, right?
It's like alias.
Yeah.
Well, but
Why would anyone register the same type under more than one aliases? Is that common?
That's
But the
something
implementation
that's a
is the
question for
same.
Diego, I
Okay.
guess.
and since it's a factory, like, does the name change semantics of the factory? Like, do I care which one I get? Like, if I register the same type under many names, why would I care which?
So I guess the way this works in larger systems is you can imagine that you have an application, right, where you have multiple different parts of the system. Like you have a caching layer and then you have the actual backend, right?
Yes.
And then the backend in V1 uses SQLite, the backend in V2 uses SQL, right? And then the caching layer still is stuck on SQLite. So you need to wait to say, well, what's my backend for the caching? What's my backend for the actual backend, right? So you need different keys for that, and the technologies are, up to them to swap them out, right?
Yeah, I still don't understand. You specified the name of the type.
When you say type,
Like,
highlight it.
yeah,
Yes.
like here.
yes,
So you specify the name of the type.
yes.
What does this invariant name change?
So
The
logically, the way I think about this API, it's effectively this same API is here with the additional class built into it. That's all it is. You're still asking for the register provider under that name, and then you're saying, well, I expect it to be a SQL one, so I try and cast this to a SQL one. If that succeeds, great.
Okay, so let's try that. So let's assume we remove the string.
From this API.
Yes. How would the semantics change?
Because how would you look it up? Because it's basically like
I would find all registered types that are the T factory type. Unless you can register more than once the same type, the set would be 1, and then I would just return it.
yes, but the problem is, so I think the way this is supposed to work is like the caching layer has a key that's specific to the caching layer.
Invariant name.
Yeah, which is the invariant name, right? So you don't want to return somebody else's provider factory, right? Because this layer needs that particular provider, because that's all the things.
If they are the same type, why not? Like, are the factories stateful?
Well, but the thing is, you don't know whether it's the same type, right? You're basically saying, I want to get the provider factory for that particular key caching, and want to do some sort of optimization if it is SQL one. So that's why you're asking whether it's the SQL one, essentially, in the same thing. If you want this API to return false, if it's not an actual SQL Server one, that's the SQLite one.
But I passed the name, so did I pass the SQLite or
They would pass in caching layer, right? And then they would say
no to T factory. What do they pass to T factory?
Whatever the type name is for SQL Server DB provider factory.
That looks like weird method.
So I agree with that. It's weird. I don't quite know why you would. The whole point of this API is effectively to not have you deal with the actual provider factory, right? The whole idea is that you can use, loose types and strings.
Exactly,
so
but you have to specify the type.
Because I can as well call the get factory for the invariant name and then check, is it this type or that type to do the optimizations,
it seems
right?
to me like I can just call this one and then you just get something back, and if you want.
So I can imagine there are two reasons for it. Why this could actually be useful. So one is that maybe you have a hierarchy of factories. Like it's deep, correct? It's not just one level. So, what you pass to the T factory is it's a base type. And then you registered multiple subtypes. And you're getting basically the invariant name selects one of the subtypes of your base type, and the T factory is the base type. I mean, it's a bit wacky, but that's why I would imagine this API would be useful. Another one is, for some reason, the factories are stateful, and you have multiple of those registered. a single type can be registered more than once because it has a state, and then the invariant name kind of accesses the particular state. Both of these scenarios are wacky and weird.
So there are some motivations from before. It seems that actually the get register or get factory is throwing if it doesn't exist. So they wanted a no throw-in version.
Oh,
but they mixed it up as well with the casting. I think I'm not sure if I'm that keen on the casting as input. If it would be just try get factory.
Exactly. And the out parameter is just DbProviderFactory.
Yep. It's kind of trying to do two things at once.
Let's see. That makes sense. And then get factory invariant names makes sense if you just all at once. You should probably use the same terminology everywhere, so probably should be called get provider invariant names. But yeah.
And is there any precedence in this register factory? There's a type, it's a factory type. Why is it type and not generic type argument?
Yeah, so the reason it's not that is so that you don't have to actually take a dependency on the type. So it's the same thing that we have in other layers of the system.
Somebody may pass you, the type instance.
Like
which
now.
means they have a dependency on the actual type, but you don't.
Yes. Yeah, but if I change the register factory to be register factory of T,
Yeah.
then you don't have dependency on type.
You have, because to call the method, you need to have the type to specify the argument when you're calling it.
Right.
So the reusable library, this library
are
doesn't have a
saying that-
dependency.
Right.
But the caller needs to now have a dependency.
So if they do type as a build of strings, then no. But is this the purpose of this API to sort of
So I think
have register factory in the weak form when there is already string overload one line above? There's this string factory as a fully qualified name.
yeah, that's a good question. I think the primary use case is this, if you read it from config, because you have the string already.
Yeah.
This one I think is more the scenario. It's like in ASP.NET they have tons of shit that is basically like configuration as code, right? So you write code to do that. So you would logically what you would do is you would probably build some sort of like extension method similar to what they have for ASP.NET, where they have like use XXX essentially in their API signatures, and like most of this stuff will be composed of like strong typed some things, right? But then some of the core API that do the registration will probably accept the system type, not a string, because you don't want to pass.
But I mean, the two methods are kind of interchangeable, because you can get type from fully qualified name, and you can get fully qualified name from type.
Correct. So we could say we strip this one here. It's just that one of the challenges of this thing is like it's not super easy to get that thing, because if you say full name, it's not the one you want, because you want the assembly as well. But yeah, here are the DB guys that will probably tell us.
All right.
Rejected. Okay.
Thank you for coming. We're online.
I leave you guys. You can do this.
There was a comma missing in the comment, and we rejected the proposal.
So I think I got the scenario. Let me just say what I stated earlier, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the primary scenario for this API is essentially that you want to have things like EF and other things that basically need to access, need to construct DB objects like connections and commands and readers that don't want to have a static dependency on the actual technology that you're using, SQL, SQLite, and whatever. And so the challenge is we could pass around the DbProviderFactory, but that's very inconvenient, because what you really want is you want some static registration where you can go to it and give it a string and then basically get back the factory, right? And so in fact we already have that system, except that the only way to get any factories into that system is via configuration, which doesn't exist in core. So that's why we added these APIs that allow you to would it basically put provider factories into that thing, given some names. Is that fair?
The only thing I would change about that is that we don't need this for EF core. We are not planning to use it.
Okay.
But it's mostly for compatibility with other pieces of software out there that already rely on this mechanism of the framework.
I see.
Yep. When we built the core, it didn't exist, so we figured out a way to not use it.
I mean, yeah, we purposely didn't use this or any variation of this because I think from our perspective we don't like this mechanism very much at all. We don't think it's that useful, but from a back compat with stuff that's already written to use it and doesn't want to change, it makes sense from that perspective.
That's why you don't care when I said rejected.
I don't care.
That makes sense.
I mean, when I did the initial system data common like years ago, I explicitly excluded this. But
yeah, I remember that now.
But things have changed, right? Now we want to support better back compat, so it makes sense.
So then my only question is, like, we just talked about a few things. There's some naming alignment that you probably should do, like this is co-provider variant name. You should probably call these guys also provider and variant name so the thing is consistent. And those are the same thing, right? Right.
Sure.
Then the other thing is, so why do we have like this type in here at all? Like, why does it matter? Isn't the whole point that you don't have the dependency on the type?
So this one, because it's an out parameter, allows you to type it as just a DbProviderFactory or as a specific one. If you want to have a SQL provider factory,
right,
variable, then it will work with this. If you want to have just an object, I think it would work as well. So that's the purpose. Because it's an out parameter, it has to be typed.
It's a perennial problem with out parameters, right? Which is that if I used to have to do this in the EF old stack. If I know it's going to be some type, but the out parameter is some base type, then I have to create a parameter. I have to create a variable of the base type.
Yeah, but if you know the type, then why do you pass the name? If I know the type, I would want to just call a method, that takes the out parameter.
Of a specific derived type, like SQL provider factory, and get that. I think it's called SQL type factory.
Can't remember.
Like if I am using my SQL, there is already a specific type.
Yeah.
If I know that I just want to get the implementation of that.
Yeah. Then why don't you have a method that doesn't have the string parameter?
So there was a discussion earlier.
Because so this is a mapping. Actually, there are like ADONet providers out there that have a fixed invariant name. I mean, there's nothing that enforces a specific type to use a specific invariant name. There is just a convention that all ADONet providers should follow.
Yeah.
But there are also wrapping providers. So, for instance, for scenarios like interception and profiling of ADONet, people like Franz Boma and Oren Taney have created wrapping providers. Also, I think that Linux has one of those.
But if you use this with a wrapping provider, you better not have T-Factory be SQL client factory.
Yeah, you would.
So maybe it is better to just not have this be generic. I mean, I don't care, but we actually don't want people consuming it to be tied to the specific type. Kind of one of the reasons for using this API is not to tie yourself to a specific type.
Yeah.
So
that's why I found it weird too. I mean, if you need to get it right,
I get the reasoning. I think it's okay to either way. You prefer not to have it generic because it complicates the...
I think it will be easier to understand what is holistically the whole API. It just deals with generic base type, DbProviderFactory, and every single API is like this. And if you want to downcast it, you downcast it to whatever type you want.
I mean, yeah, I'm fine with that too. I mean, I think from a consumer perspective, you would normally never see or care about the generic, and that's why this pattern is used quite frequently, right? Because you write out whatever, then the generic is always inferred, so you never see the generic. And
Why
it just
the time to the out?
Yeah, but my problem was not that, syntax of specifying the... I know that the inference works, generic inference. My problem was, me as a user that is kind of, I don't understand the whole technology. I'm like, I already told you what type I want. Why do I have to give you the name of the I told you, but no. I told you the type because I had to pass an out parameter that has a type.
The two are not one-to-one. I mean, the two are, in effect, one-to-one in most cases.
Exactly.
But there's nothing that ties those two things
And I'm
together.
saying,
There's nothing that makes those two things.
but my mental model, I kind of think that they are one-to-one, and I wonder why the heck would you have this API?
So,
Because, and my mental model may be wrong.
I agree with your mental model for the following reason. If you already have the derived type, then why are you using this API? Like, you just have that factory, you don't need to derive from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, it's okay to have this. Also, I want to be more specific.
So like the only thing is like what's nice about not having the generic is that this code compiles.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to specify this thing. And if 90% of people would do that,
well, it seems superfluous, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I mean, if you really want the SQL one, well, nothing prevents you from saying, you know, if factory is SQL, whatever the thing is, right? X, and then you just use X under the if, right? And you do whatever you want to do, right?
Yep. I also wanted to be specific. This API in particular is, from my perspective, nice to have. Like, I don't like the fact that GetFactory always throws right now, but
that's
we have a customer that has asked for this. It's like,
well, you could handle the exception. It's just that it's generally bad to do that, depending on how many times you have to call GetFactory, right? You don't.
And in general, our pattern is like if we have get method and add try method, like it's not something on top of there's basically additional value of casting on top of that, which is like suddenly it's kind of like general pattern like get method try method like I totally understand what it is.
Yeah. So that would suggest we strip the generic, and then if you really want to cast, you cast. Then the other question was
unregister.
So unregistered, what would be unregistered factory to just align those two things as well?
Yeah.
And then a boy would call this get provider invariant names because that's.
I started finding a good name for that.
Yeah. So like
and one more, the factory type over there, we said that it should be, the factory assembly qualified name, it should be factory type assembly qualified name.
Let me actually paste this into an editor and actually make the edits. Oh, it's readable. So we said this should probably be
sorry.
Provider invariant name.
Provider invariant name is the general name for this thing.
I think at some point, what happened here is that at some point I was trying to remove redundancy from the API. It's like the class itself is DbProviderFactories. It has get factory, get provider factory, or get factory register. The only thing that you can possibly register here is a factory, but still the name of the method is register factory.
Yeah, well, we could be consistent in that way too if we decided.
Yeah, but we cannot change the existing members. So
right. Okay. Yeah.
Then I think we said this should probably be factory type.
And do you really want this string overload?
Yeah, so that's the other question. Like, why do we even have these two? Like, do you ever have the type in your hands anyway? I mean, isn't the whole point that it's all string based?
If you comment out.
Damn it.
Yeah, comment this one out.
Like, if this wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So, I think if we want to preserve the backward compatibility, one of the features that it had was you didn't have to have a hard reference to the provider you're using, which is kind of why they were registered in config in the first place and why you had an assembly name in config. So if we want to preserve that, where somebody can register it without having a hard reference, that's why the string one is useful. So I would argue that if we want to trim back to the minimal API, that one you commented out.
Yeah, so
but you can do.
Makes sense to me.
So then it was argued that
custom config, right?
I might have a hard reference to it anyway. It's not a requirement I don't. In that case, having them call, type of whatever, get whatever name is kind of silly, so we put the other one in as well.
So if you let's say
but
if you don't have this, what you would just say, you would just say type.
But the type is not concrete type. It can be any type. So you can do just exactly type and string name.
That's effectively what the customer has to write.
Which wouldn't be horrible. Right?
Yeah, agreed.
It's only like
Yeah.
in the past, because it was based on the configuration system, you didn't actually need to have the type until you call
So-
the factory.
All of these can be
So-
trimmed down in various ways. So a lot of this is sugar. I mean that's
Right.
and I don't have a very strong feeling about what sugar you have. I don't care if it's only a type, only a string, or both.
So the only reason why I think maybe not having this one may be useful is that fucking up that string here is super easy, right? Because like
The
this,
syntax is very specific.
and if this guy later down the road has to call basically get type, then depending on how you look at the stack, it's like, oh, this is a bug implementation rather than if this is in your if this is literally your code, like you are basically top of the stack, right? It's just like it just
Puts the bug where it belongs.
The only scenario that we move is, let's say you have like a launcher application that does all the registration of all the providers that the application is going to use, and then it starts, it calls into code that actually knows about the provider, but this one doesn't know anything, it only knows the name. Which is equivalent to the scenario that worked in .NET Framework, in which all this was...
Which means that you create your custom config, basically. Because that's how the launcher would know, right?
In .NET Framework, at the time, this was from configuration, it was just metadata.
Exactly.
And only when you call get factory, you actually...
So it changes the resolution time for when you need that assembly to be available, right?
That's true, but I don't know if for better or for worse. Because it delays it till you start getting them. And
well, what is true though in this case is you would so let's say you have an app today where somebody has a configuration file of a bogus provider that nobody ever asks for. So yeah, the application would never crash.
Exactly. If you now move this to startup has to basically call type get type, and then that fails. Well, then you basically trade a working app for a non-working
It's also, in the past, it's been very common to see people register lots of these things and then only use one or two at a time. In fact, there was actually a very bad bug in the .NET framework where a long time ago, like 1x days or 2x days, ADO.NET shipped like a sample Oracle provider and a sample something.
It wasn't something.
Well, it was a crappy.
It wasn't intended to be a sample.
Anyway, and then it had code in there that loaded all these eagerly when you loaded ADO.NET, and this was like massive thing, and it took ages for us to get that out of there because it was a breaking change because somebody might be using these references that we were loading automatically, even though so it's like I don't know. The lazy part is good in my mind, but I don't care. I don't strongly.
I mean, honestly, there's not much negative in having both. I mean, like,
I would keep both.
whoever is the owner of this feature should probably...
I mean, to be fair, it's better than we have in other places, right? If you look at our designer attributes, they have the same thing, right? We have a constructor that takes the type, we have a constructor that takes the string for the same reason.
Actually, the one I see as optional is the one that takes a type, because provider factories are supposed to be singletons. They all are supposed to have the .instance field, and if you have the type, you should be able to get the instance as well.
Yeah, so you're saying instead of having a type, you would have the actual instance?
Yeah, which is what works for the first API. The third one is the one that for me is kind of...
Oh, I see.
Because the first one you would say SQL client factory dot instance, and you pass that. Now the instance thing is purely a convention, but it's a convention that all, if they're going to work correctly in the .NET framework, they had to follow that convention. Now it's possible to write providers and use them with EF4 or whatever that don't, because we don't care about all that crap. But I think it's reasonable to say that any provider factory will have a .NET instance.
Actually, otherwise Get Factory is not going to work. The implementation of Get Factory calls the
because it's a singleton. It's supposed to be a singleton. So.
By the way, I just noticed the first method is extension method.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal, but it's kind of weird. You would call it on a factory. The method is called register factory, and then you have to pass some provider invariant name, not a factory.
I agree that I think the register factory is kind of redundant.
Yeah, it highlights the issue, correct? Because you have something like, you have a variable called factory, and you called register factory, and then provider name. That seems like I'm registering provider name, not a factory.
Yep. It would be nice if it was just register or register name or something.
It's really a mapping. What you're doing is mapping that factory to that name.
I mean, we could literally strip factory from all these things because you're on the DbProviderFactories, right? Like, there's nothing else to register.
Yeah. The previous iteration of the design didn't have factory there.
You understand with the get factory, right?
I realized that get factory has it. The other point that I think is valid to discuss here is Franz mentioned before he felt somewhat strongly that we should have overloads that don't take the invariant name at all, because in theory the invariant name can be inferred from the type. Like in 99% of the...
99%?
No, it's not 99%. If you remove from the...
We know that there are examples where that isn't the case.
So there is the SQL CE doesn't follow the convention, the SQL CE provider factory. And also all the wrapping providers that I was mentioning before would not follow the convention. But every other provider that we have surveyed...
So what is the name then? Like, is it actually the type name of the factory usually?
It's the namespace basically what they use for different names.
The fully qualified name.
It's a namespace.
It's a namespace.
Yeah, I guess. It doesn't include the name of the type.
SQL compact doesn't follow that convention.
So what we could do, I mean, it may not be what you want, but like, what we could do is you could say, make it optional, right? And say if it didn't specify it, we just say that thing, right? Factory type dot namespace.
Namespace, yeah.
I mean, that's not unreasonable.
My only worry with that is that for the wrapping provider scenarios, this is always 100% wrong.
See, I don't think we should. I think we need to accept that the provider invariant name. The other thing is that provider invariant name, there's a well-known provider invariant name, but there's nothing that stops people in the old system registering under a different invariant name, because they just put it in a config file under some invariant name, and then they say, give me that with that invariant name. Right. So you can have two different, for example, SQL client providers registered under two different invariant names. I haven't seen people do that, but I think just looking at the fact that not everybody follows the convention, the fact that there is no strong semantics between the two, there's just this convention, it makes sense in my mind to just say, when you're registering, you tell us this and you tell us that, and we map those two things together, not confuse it by saying sometimes we infer, but it might be wrong, and then you have to go look at what it is, and blah, blah, blah.
It's basically observed policy or convention, as you say, and suddenly we're trying to bring it back to the API, which is kind of, and it's not 100%, that feels weird.
Yeah.
If it would be like the design from the scratch, like, yep, we're going to do this convention, you can overload with something special, I could see that. But
if we were designing from scratch, factories would probably have a property or something like a static property that would be a name. And this is the name that they were supposed to use.
From scratch, we wouldn't have any of this. We don't need any of this. This is all just to support legacy stuff.
And this register factory behavior is like try or really hard register and throw exception if there is duplicate?
The idea with this API is the last one wins.
Yeah, replace.
So what exception do you throw?
No, we don't. It's the last one wins.
So it's okay.
On register, we don't throw it.
Which is actually probably a better design than what we compared with yesterday, right? Where it says first one wins. I mean, that's honestly the worst design usually, because it's very hard to reason about first one.
And the reason last one wins really makes sense in this case is because, as Dave was pointing out, there's wrapping providers, and so it's very common, for example, that if you take the case with the config file in .NET Framework, a very common thing to do would be to put in your config file something that registers a profile as a wrapping provider, and then you run your application and it runs with the profiler. So the idea here with the last one wins is basically the same. Like, I put something in here, it's going to overwrite whatever was there and then it runs with my profiler.
No, that makes complete sense to me. That you want to have a replace policy and not a to-run policy. I mean, you could argue that you can still do the same thing by calling unregister and then calling register again, but like, it seems
Like if wrapping is a common scenario, it seems like you want to have that as a
Also,
first class.
unregistered, I consider it also as a nice to have. It doesn't seem critical. You don't like it.
Do you want anybody to be able to unregister, or only the code that registered?
I don't know that there's really any scenarios we have for register, right? I can't think of an example when you really want to register one real.
It may be worth removing then, because it may be dangerous for like random code like unregistered providers. I mean, do we even want that?
Well,
Because I was thinking that if registered return like a GUID, then you have to pass the GUID to unregistered. That would make it safer.
I think once you're messing with these APIs, anything can happen. So, I mean, you don't have unregister, you could still call register, and it would replace it with some other one. Do we have scenarios for unregister?
No, the only one was basically you are like a advanced user that is trying to register things. You are already using the try get factory method, and you want to set up things so that it won't return anything. I mean, you can false. But it was for completeness.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could imagine code that would iterate through all of the available providers and do something for all of them, and you tell me, actually, I don't want you to do it for this one, but it's right.
To me, it's I don't know. Like it's just my ADD. I guess is like I like symmetry. I always find it very weird when there's asymmetry. But yeah, the only scenario I could imagine is diagnostics. You really want to make sure that no code uses a given provider. You remove it and see whether something blows up, and then you fix that part, right? Yeah. Right. I mean that, but that also seems very weird. Like. Yeah.
And the last one is also nice to have. So the functionality,
essentially, right?
Yeah, if you call get factory classes, you already get the same functionality. It's only that then you need to start like accessing
data table part
fields in the data table.
Yeah. No, I think this one I kind of like agree with Franz. Like if you have to do this, like the current API just starts tremendously. Because it's all untyped too, but you have to kind of know it's the, I don't know, the first field is a string or something, and the second probably because that's all useful.
And I assume that it's get provider method, not a property, because it's expensive? Or do you have the names in memory?
Probably a dictionary on the cover, I would hope.
There is actually no dictionary in the, well, in .NET Framework there is no dictionary. I think in the initial PR from France there is no dictionary.
It's a data table actually?
It's a data table, but you can always create this on the fly. The other alternative is to maintain a dictionary and to keep it as a cache version of the data table that we invalidate every time you make any changes.
Well, hopefully it's also a small data table, but I guess in this case, even if you have one, we would have to clone one, right? Because we don't want to give you the existing one. So like this API is probably more expensive than this one would be, right? Just from a pure allocation standpoint. But
currently the implementation uses data table to store them. Yeah. And I think that it was different to that was like 50 times lower than the dictionary.
Yeah, like I would not be sure.
70 times. 70 times.
70? Okay.
I just started like 10 minutes ago or something.
I have one more question about the register factor. Is it the order of the parameters? It's reverse compared to the other methods. Does it have any legacy?
Actually, that's a good point. Probably provider name should probably be the first one.
Basically, you have the provider invalid name always as a key, sort of.
Yeah. Logically, that's the key. The other one is the value, right? So you kind of want to have the key first and then the value second, right?
That seems like a...
Yeah.
So you already do the extension method version?
Yes, I just killed it.
Okay, can you add it back without the this argument?
Can I add it back without this argument? Yes, I can. Let me just copy that.
I missed when we made a decision to get rid of it.
Oh, because we talked about it earlier, and then I commented it out, and nobody was objecting to that. So
No, I wasn't paying attention. Sorry.
He's boiling the frog. He first comments out, then it disappears.
Well, the one that we should remove would be the third one, not the first one.
Yeah. If you don't like it to be an extension method, I would still have it as
Yeah.
I think that's the one that Franz really wanted as well, right?
Yeah.
So then it's just sort them from less type to more type. Alright.
So I think the second one you could argue should go away.
I think actually Franz mentioned that he would like to have that one, but anyway, there were so many iterations.
But frankly, they're all overloads. You can keep
All three of them, it seems fine. To me, the biggest problem was the fact that it's an extension method, but then if we go down with this path, I actually think it's not too bad.
Okay.
And then it seems somewhat logical.
should we rename the arguments to be provider factory or something like that?
You mean these guys here?
Yeah, because
Yeah, then you have to say this is provider factory type assembly qualified name. I mean, like,
Okay,
you can,
well,
but like, that one goes really long. Then. But yeah.
One of our forced things in system.
I think for types like this, I think it's okay to use the last down thing because it's kind of clearly referring to.
Yeah.
Alright, then. Any more objections? Otherwise, that's it.
So there was another title in the, if you go back to the original
To the actual type
issue, name and description arguments over here. Oh, this is the old one.
The original one is below. This is the original one.
Okay, so in the original implementation of this internet framework, there is this name and description arguments that are like friendly, user-friendly names and description. Name is actually used as the attribute name in the XML config file, so it's required from the perspective of config file. It's not used for anything. So
name is used for that or description is used for that?
Name.
Okay.
So there is a variant name, but that is in the configuration file, that's data, and name is actually the name of the attribute. So it's required on the configuration file. From the perspective of usability, the only scenario I can think of, this could be somewhat useful. Is like you have a dashboard and you are showing all the metadata about all the registered providers in this application. There's no functional. Provider invariant name is the only one that has functional indication.
I'm saying if you're showing the data, you show the provider invariant name anyway.
Yeah.
The name is just meaningless data.
Yeah. But if you go to machine config,
That's what you
there
have.
are descriptions and names.
Right. Yeah, I remember that now because that's the thing we talked about earlier. Because Krista was saying, why is it called provider variant name and not name? And I said, because I think there was a name that was already taken. That was not the one.
So my preference would be to just ignore this thing as legacy and not have it.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Let's go with this and then see what we get, how much we get crucified for that. There's only like 500 comments, right? Right.
Well, ask the owner to update the top of the file, and then we'll.
Who found this?
I'll update that.
Or unless we are okay with us updating the top comment.
Does Frank know this? Sorry? Does Frank know this? Hopefully. We should ask him.
I'm pretty sure he has feedback.
You want to make that?
Yeah, he's already on there. Right? So.
Pretty sure he will tell us what he
They're
thinks.
online. Diego.
I know.
Okay.
I think he's going to ask for the extension.
I was just asking because in terms of
Right.
Well, it would have to be separate type and something, right? So it's a little bit, again, is a new type introduction really worth the convenience so much.
What does it mean for France and anything? Like he wraps these things? Is that what he does?
He owns an ORM.
Yeah, but he should just be a pure consumer. That's why I'm asking. Like, what does it mean for him?
So he also owns a profiler. And he often needs to tell his own customers to fiddle with the configuration file, or in the case of .NET potentially to fiddle with code, to configure providers, and to initialize this provider.
That makes sense. All right. Sweet. Then I think that's it for today. Thanks, guys, online.